I was amazed to find that this Corgi model is based on a real car. It looks like something completely fantastical, almost sci-fi. It didn't come from the minds of Metoy's designers, rather brothers Dennis and Peter Adams. And it wasn't just a concept car either, it was a genuine one-off 1960s race car. Now, being a bit of an automotive dweeb, I was already aware of Marcos through vehicles like the Mini Marcos or the more contemporary Mantis from the 1990s. But looking at this space-age design, I was in awe that it was anything other than a work of fiction. So my aim today is to modify this model to get it looking how the actual 1968 car appeared. The Corgi's design isn't flawless. The wheels are much too large, which caused two issues. One, its ride height was hilariously high, and two, its wheel arches were much too big. The model isn't nearly as sleek and elegant as the actual thing, but I will try my best to work around this. Corgi made the decision to recreate the Marcos in Diecast in 1970. You'll find out why the XP was so obscure shortly, but I think it was certainly an odd choice of casting. It was first produced for the short-lived Rockets range between 1970 and 1971, with its detachable chassis. This would explain the excessively oversized wheels and arches. These were painted metallic gold with a black cast metal base, had amber tinted windows, and its rear grille and taillights were trimmed in red. After the Rockets range was promptly discontinued, it was produced up until 1975 with Whizzwheels instead. This version was always painted orange, either bright or a more creamy shade, paired with a black cast metal baseplate. Windows remained amber, but according to Bill Mansky's guide, untinted types were available too. I couldn't see any evidence of these in searching. All that I could find had a yellowy tint. Between 1975 and 1977, it was converted to be a Growler. The casting was modified as it now had a more distinctive rear bumper. These saw the metal bases replaced with plastic ones that housed a mechanism so that the car would make a sound as it was pushed along. This modification meant that the mid-engine assembly had to be raised. A separate plastic engine poked through the opening at the back, and it was left uncovered by the window piece. Growlers were painted a metallic amber or a flat orange. I really don't like those versions. For me, the Whizzwheels ones were best, though I do have a soft spot for Corgi Rockets. So let's delve into the Marcos a little, shall we? The Marcos name is a portmanteau of the first three letters of the surnames of its founders Jem Marsh and Frank Costin. It wasn't the first time the latter's surname had been used in this manner in the world of automotive engineering. The year before Marcos was founded in 1958, Frank's brother Mike had co-founded Cosworth with Keith Duckworth, famed for their high-performance powertrains. Early Marcos cars drew on Frank Costin's aviation experience, using streamlined designs and lightweight materials, such as wood laminates for the monocoque chassis body units. Even with modest 1 and 1.5 litre Ford engines, they gave good performance, earning its pedigree on the racetrack. Notable customers included Jackie Stewart, who gained his first racing experience in a Marcos, Derek Bell and Jackie Oliver. These early cars weren't spectacular to look at, but sold well on their capability alone. Costin left the company in 1961, leaving it in the hands of brothers Dennis and Peter Adams, who worked to simplify the construction techniques. In 1963, they designed the Marcos 1800, built atop a wooden chassis, but it was draped in a distinctive fiberglass shell. During 1966, the Mini Marcos was introduced. This utilised mini mechanics with a fiberglass body. It sold extremely well. Of note, it was the only British finisher in the 1966 24 Hours of Le Mans. Then in 1968, the brothers were commissioned to build a mid-engine sports car for sister company Marcos Racing, with a view to competing in Group 6 3-litre competition and at Le Mans. Its design had distinctive angles, once again combining a wooden chassis, fiberglass body and a perspex-clad cockpit. The perspex extended over the engine bay, and its doors were also a perspex semi-gullwing design. It had side-mounted fuel tanks and radiators, and was initially powered by a 3-litre Repco Brabham Formula 1 engine. It also had fully independent suspension. Following testing at the Castle Combe and Silverstone circuits, the Marcos Mantis XP was entered into the 1,000 km of Spa on the 26th of May 1968. Scheduled driver Robin Widdows withdrew before the start of the race, allowing founder Jem Marsh to fill the vacant seat alongside Eddie Nelson. The weather conditions in Belgium were horrendous. It was so bad that water was leaking into the cockpit and flooding it. It was brought into the pits in order for holes to be drilled into the floor of the wooden chassis to let the water out. After 17 laps, the alternator succumbed to this water ingress and the car was forced into retirement. I've managed to find some very brief snippets of footage of the car at Spa in 1968 from the beginning of the race and of it pitting. Be sure to stick around until later in the video to see that. Unfortunately, this would be the only competitive outing for the XP. It was entered for Le Mans that year, but the race was postponed by the FIA due to student riots in Paris. The car was returned to the UK and its Repco V8 was swapped for a Buick V8. Jem used the car on the road for a while, but after tax issues arose, the car was relocated to the US. The car ended up in California, where it was road registered in 1971. It remains with the same family who originally bought it, and it has been painstakingly restored to originality. Back in 1969, the Adams brothers were commissioned to build a steel chassis with a view to move away from the labour-intensive wooden structures. This saved 15 hours on manufacturing times on every car. Encouraged by a healthy register of orders, in 1970 the decision was taken to move to a larger factory. Production was anticipated to be 6 to 10 cars per week, with a large proportion of output destined for the US. However, this relocation interrupted output, which, combined with problems with the US importer and the collapse of the UK market, resulted in the closure of the original company in 1972. Jem Marsh continued with a spares and service facility for existing Marcos owners, before reacquiring the Marcos name and moulds in 1976. Manufacturing was relaunched in 1981, with many Marcoses sold in kit form in the blossoming kit car market. They later returned to motorsport with the 1993 GT Le Mans model. In the late 90s, the Mantis was launched, which was a good seller for Marcos. Then, in 2001, Marcos entered receivership. Marcos Heritage bought up all of the company's assets, including all moulds, tooling, jigs and drawings, which ensured continuity of spare parts. 2009 was the 50th anniversary of Marcos. In August of that year, an event was held at the Prescott Hill Climb, which promised to be the largest gathering of Marcos cars ever. The Morris family, who own the XP, flew it over especially for the event, returning it to the UK for the first time in 40 years. The following year, it was back in the UK again for the Goodwood Festival of Speed, brief footage of which can be seen in the video outro. The wealth of pictures from it at Goodwood in 2010 perfectly served as reference for my recreation of the body decals for the Corgi model. I had to work around some of the model's shortcomings, but for the most part I was able to replicate it like for like. Those side-mounted number 8s were probably my biggest compromise. Due to the gaping rear wheel arch, there wasn't a huge amount of space to locate it. Realistically, it should have had a longer wheelbase or just smaller wheels. But hey ho, you work with what you work with, especially on a model that is at least 50 years old. It's time for the finishing touches now, as I fill out the colour of the lighting, including a dab of yellow for the fog lamps. Ever since I changed to Mr. Hobby top coats, I've noticed that the Sharpie marker would run after application, unlike my old clear coats. That's why they are now applied post top coat. It's a similar story with the Citadel Gloss Nuln Oil. I don't really use much of that these days other than on lighting, but this rear grille was crying out for a bit of shading. Finally, Ammo Wet Effects helps bring that lighting to life with a nice glossy finish. Here are all of the parts that make up Corgi's Marcos XP. You'll note that I've slipped some styrene offcuts under the front axle to help reduce the ride height. Unfortunately, I couldn't do the same with the rear as there's nothing there to stop the axle slipping out at either side, so it'll be slightly raked in appearance. So let's secure it with a screw. This was how the Corgi Juniors Marcos XP looked when we kicked things off. I'm still recovering from the fact that this wild and almost alien design is based on a real race car, not even a Flight of Fantasy concept car. Yes, the casting has some shortcomings, but I've tried to work with those to get the finished article looking as close to the real thing as I possibly could. So without further ado, let's take a look at the fruits of my labour. I've painted the model in a shade to match the 1968 racer, and then I've designed the decals to match it as best as I could too, within the limitations of the casting. The main limitation was the size of the wheels originally used, and the arches left behind. I've had to fit the replacement 4-spoke rims with some very chunky rubber to compensate. Usually I'd call out the amber tinted windows, but do you know what? I actually quite like them, and I think it works. Do you agree? Tell me down in the comments, and while you're at it, please leave a like too. First though, stick around until the outro to see the Marcos Mantis XP at its one and only race. There's only the tiniest slice of footage, but look how much more futuristic it is compared to its competitors. Then how about hitting that subscribe button if you haven't already? But all that leaves me to say is thanks for watching, and I'll see you again for the next one. Bye for now.